Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Mark Borstein. I'm the CTO at Tremolo Security and co-author of Kubernetes and Enterprise Guide, first, second, and third edition. Talk about third edition. Scott, my illustrious and infamous co-host, will be joining us shortly. He has a day job that requires him to do work. Um, yeah, but he'll join us in a few minutes. We are continuing our path down chapter 19, our final chapter in the book. Last week, we deployed a tenant, right? The goal of the chapter is building a platform for a multi-tenant kube solution using a lot of what we've learned throughout the course of the book. So we deployed a vCluster, we deployed Vault, we added a couple of other systems to it, and we made it all automated and self-service. And so we did that. We got it all working. Awesome. Well, you know, we added some stuff in there from from earlier, or we added some software in there that was not part of the book initially. So we added Argo CD in there for GitOps. And we talk about GitOps in chapter 18 and ideas around GitOps and how it works. So we mention it throughout the book, but it doesn't get its own chapter. And Argo, which I gotta say, Argo CD, if you think about any one single piece of software that has impacted the cloud native world, if not the IT world, more than Kubernetes or as much as it's Argo. That's one of the most impactful systems. And we don't even talk about it until the final chapter, which in retrospect is a bit of a failing on our part. But we do talk about it, and we wanted to give it some more love as part of the walk through the labs chapter 19. So technically the lab itself is done, it's up, it's running. What we're going to be doing this week is we're going to look at Argo CD. We're going to look at where it fits in the lab, how we deployed it, take a little bit of a look at the Pulumi code. It's actually pretty straightforward to deploy. It does have a couple of tricks in it. It's got some things that are a little interesting. And so this is going to be more exploring what's already there. So we're not going to be running any new stuff. We might do a couple of things here and there just to show you that stuff is working. But we're not going to dive, or we're not running any new labs. The lab itself is done. So that said, let's take a look at what we have and what we've deployed inside of our environment. So I'm going to go ahead and share my work, share my screen. So let's see here. And we got to keep an eye out for Scott. And of course, wherever you are, if you are in, hey, talking about our usual crew, Kafka, welcome, my friend. If you are out there in TV land, please say hi. We love talking to folks. You got stories, you got stuff you want to share, maybe something we missed. Please, 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 love to hear from everybody. So I've got my Proxmox box up. I've got my everything up and running. And so this is the same setup we had last time. And I'm going to go ahead and log back into Open Unison. So I'm going to start off as Monsieur Mosley here. So Matt Mosley is an admin. You can do everything. And let's go check out Argo. Let's just look at this thing real quick. So the first thing you're going to find is there's some ugly red here. So funny story. I made a bit of a mistake on sealing my vault and blew it up. If you run the unseal scripts against the vault that is in a, if you try to run the unseal script with bad keys, it somehow manages to completely bork your vault install. So, and I didn't take a backup, which was bad on me. So this looks degraded, and that's because if we take a look at it, we'll see that we can't get that pull secret back. But we'll talk about it. We're not talking too much about Vault today. We're talking about Argo and GitOps. So I decided to just leave it as. So, you can fill an entire book with Argo CD. In fact, there is a book that came out a little while ago about Argo CD. I've started to go through it. It's great. Our friends over at the CNCF Virtual Book Club, I think they're going through every chapter. They gave it the Enterprise Guide treatment. So I would definitely recommend that. I will say, assuming we do a 4th edition, I think we're going to give Argo a lot more love. It definitely deserves it because there's a lot going on here. So that being said, real quick, let's look at the UI. I love GUIs. Like I'm not ashamed to say it. I love GUIs. You cannot get this much information. We're looking at our entire cluster, quick snapshot. We see something's wrong. We see where you can't get that from a CLI. Doesn't exist. And what's interesting about Argo, and I've seen this in multiple instances, where Argo becomes the gateway into the cluster, which I don't love, to be honest, and we'll talk about that for a bit. But what's interesting about Argo is it's got such a rich UI. You can do so much in it. So like if we're taking a look at our app, we can see that it's out of sync. Okay, what's out of sync? You can look and it'll tell you, some of the annotations are off. Some of the labels are off, things of that nature. So it'll also, if you go to like let's go to an application here. Well, we're not running anything in prod. So let's go over to, no? No, I want to go to dev. Excuse me, my app, dev, here we go. So we can see that the pod is running. And there we go. Nope, wrong one. See, this is from a rebooted server. So see if we can find the right pod. I thought the pod was there. Maybe I'm wrong. See, no? Okay. Maybe it's just not letting us look at the logs. But normally you can look at the logs, you can see what's going on, you can see what's synced, what's not. It's a great GUI. So now you'll notice, I'm going to go ahead and log out here of this GUI. We have SSO set up. Please do not use users in Argo. Please don't. We set up SSO with Open Unison, obviously. Argo ships with decks built in. So, and I think this is a smart approach on Argo side. They're saying, we're not going to, we're not going to implement our own. Oh, look who decided to show up.
Yeah.
You have a nice lion there, buddy? A little bit of a lazy morning?
Yeah, always. I don't do much, right? I mean, I'm always
I don't
trying
think
to
you got the
figure.
right mic on, man.
Oh, man, this is how the day's been. Well, that's weird.
Sounds like you've got your desktop mic, not your headset mic.
It did.
There you go.
There we go. That's better.
Or for some reason, that's how it's been. I don't do anything all morning, right, Mark? I just try to fill time.
Play some video games. Yeah. Drink a couple cups of coffee.
That's why I was late. I figured I had nothing else to do. I got bored, and
So yeah, so we're talking about Argo, right? And one of the, now that you're here, one of the things I said when we opened up is that Argo CD especially is, outside of Kubernetes, is probably the single most influential bit of software running in enterprise IT today. There's always a multi-stage ArgoCon at every KubeCon. And I think that's the only one that's multi-stage at this point with the 0 day. And I'm going to be honest, you could probably do an entire conference just on Argo. Maybe not just Argo CD. You do workflows. rollouts, the other stuff. But Argo CD and GitOps, I mean, that is one of the most influential parts of cloud native. And so we were talking about how Argo deploys by default. We don't in our setup, and we'll look at how we deployed it. Argo by default deploys with DEX for SSO, which is kind of smart. Like I get this from the Argo developers. They say, look, we're just going to do OIDC. We're not going to worry about how you integrate with other stuff besides OIDC.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go integrate with DEX. And as long as the DEX can integrate with you, that works. Now, you don't have to go through DEX. So like here, we're using Open Unison for SSO, but there's no DEX here, right? It's all just Argo. Let's go check out the dashboard.
And I like to call this out, Mark, because we get this question, right? People will say, why Open Unison? Why this? Why that? And I'm going to take it from my standpoint, right? Because yours would be self-fulfilling to say this, but if you need enterprise support, which obviously a big organization would, you're not getting it for DEX. You're not getting it for Keycloak, right? And Open Unison is open source, but offers, of course, support. So you don't want your identity provider going down, right? And if it gets into a DEX or Keycloak, going into an issues, and maybe getting an answer, right? And on top of that, can you send logs to them? Most likely not.
Right.
So not faulting anybody, like you said. I understand why it's a default thing in a lot of examples, but you really got to consider this. And I know we've had this question over the years about why don't we use something like that? Because it's an enterprise book, right? There should be an option, and there's other features. Let's not go too far into those weeds, right? All the workflows, the namespaces with the second version, I'll call, of Open Unison, not just login portal. But I like to call that out. Sorry to interrupt on that.
No, I appreciate it, Scott. And we're going to look at how we deployed Argo here. If you are an app developer, though, support OIDC. Don't try and write your own for everything, right? It's the year of our Lord 2025. It'll be 2026 in a couple weeks. OIDC is ubiquitous. Just do OIDC. You can see here, we don't have any Argo. Now, fun fact, because I had fun working on this the last several days. Open Unison, we are going to be deprecating the Kubernetes dashboard in our next release. You heard it here first, folks. And replacing it with in-cluster headlamp. You're still going to need, at least for a while, Kubernetes dashboard if you want to UI for multi-tenancy. Headlamp doesn't do multi-tenancy real well. It makes a lot of assumptions about what you're going to have access to. But if you're using just the login portal, Headlamp's nice. It's got a lot of features that are a lot nicer than Kubernetes dashboard. But anyway, that said, there is no DEX here, right? Like, let's make this a little easier to read. There is no DEX. So we removed that as part of the install. We're integrated directly with Open Unison now. Something else I want to show off when it comes to logging in with OIDC into, you can't see that up here, so I'm going to move it down here. So Argo CD does have a CLI component. So I'm going to just go ahead, let's log in. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but let's go off. There we go. And then if we go to our request, no, headers, maybe headers. I thought they were doing it now. Are they not? There's the auth, claims, client ID, redirect, code, scope, state. Oh, I thought Interesting. I'm gonna have to go look at that. So what I'm looking for here is the inclusion of Pixie. So that's a standard to make the OIDC process have just a little bit more entropy by including some more junk in the request. We're going to look at how the SSO integrates with Open Unison here in a sec. There's no client secret because, like Kubernetes, Argo CD has a CLI. Argo CD has some of its own APIs, which complicates its integration. Because usually, when you're talking about a cloud native system like Argo, where it's got its own CRDs, you just interact with the Kubernetes API. There are some objects, though, you can't create via the Kubernetes API, at least not directly, and namely projects. And so you can do it via the CLI. You can do it via their API, or you can do it via an app set, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So their CLI, we used it when we deployed the infrastructure for the first time. We did an Argo login. And so there's when you have a CLI and a web component, you can't have a client secret, right? Because then you have to distribute the client secret. It means everybody has to have that client secret. Now it becomes a big, giant shared password, which one is annoying and nobody wants to do it. Two, doesn't add any security because if everybody knows it, what the hell's the point? And three, we're an enterprise book. Now you're talking about enterprise security controls for a password that you have to let everybody know. That's bad. So you can figure out without a client secret. And so Pixie should be in there. I'm gonna actually look to see, maybe we misconfigured it. When you look at Argo, Argo is broken up into projects, clusters, and repositories. So you don't generally name something, you say where it's coming from or where it's going, and we figure out, or Argo figures out the rest. Projects are a good way to be able to break down RBAC. So Argo has its own built-in RBAC model. It's similar to Kubernetes, but not quite the same. And so whenever you have a multi-tenant Argo solution, and Argo's built to be multi-tenant, like this isn't like, oh, we're shoehorning stuff in to make it work. No, Argo CD is built to be a multi-tenant system. Excuse me, I need the caffeine to flow through my veins. So what you do is you say, okay, we're going to have a project, and then inside each project, we're going to attach repositories. So if we look at, for instance, the cluster operations project, we'll see that we have one source repository. Make this a little bigger. So this is our cluster operations. So this is our global GitHub repo, or GitLab repo, I guess, but Git repo. And this is where we keep information that is going to be for the entire cluster, or for the entire for the IDP cluster, our developer platform cluster. This is separate from our app clusters or our app projects. So if we go to like my app dev, it's got a completely different Git repo. Now we could add other repos, right? We can also say, look at the destination. So here we're saying, you know what? This is our virtual cluster for our dev. If I'm a member and I have the right permissions in this project, I can go ahead and push to this. So, or I can log in and I can see what's going on here. That's the first layer of authorization. Then you've got clusters. So this is where things start to get kind of interesting. Our Argo talks to our control plane cluster, which is the cluster it runs in. It talks to our dev cluster and our prod cluster. It also talks to every vCluster. right? So we've got in cluster, that's our control plane, dev and prod, and then our app has 2 vClusters. Scott, how do you think Argo talks to those clusters?
You mean the vClusters?
Any of them? How do you think that Argo talks to the API servers on remote clusters?
It's a pretty, I hate to say this, Mark, but it sounds like a vague question when you say that. You mean integration?
From an authentication standpoint, how does Argo authenticate to those remote clusters?
Does it use OIDC and JOTS?
Not directly, but good. I like where your head is at least.
What I was kind of thinking.
Yeah. So if we go back to way back eons ago when we did chapter 6, I think when we did authentication, we talked about how if you need to talk to a remote API server, thou shalt not use a static service account, right? It's not what it was designed for. It's not what it was built for. It's easy to lose. Hard to rotate. So how do we talk to all these clusters? Well, if you're going to do it statically, like if you just downloaded Argo CD and said, I'm gonna onboard a new vCluster, you go to Argo CD, I think it's like add project or add cluster. It takes your kube control configuration file, creates a service account with cluster admin privileges, gets the token, and sticks it inside of its, I think it's in a Redis database. You see a few problems with that.
No, there's more than a few. Other than cyber coming after me, but.
Yeah, but you've got static tokens stored in a Redis database, not stored in secrets, stored in a Redis database. You're not able to use secrets management to manage them, right? And then here's the other thing is if you want to automate that process, you've got to call the Argo API. You can't call a Kubernetes API. And the Argo CD API does not accept dynamic tokens. It only accepts static tokens. So that means your automation system also has a static token. So there are a couple ways that we handle this that we're gonna. I hate saying we're gonna talk about this in a second, but it's just like ogres and onions, we have layers that we have to go through before we get to the top. So if we take a look, like let's say we look at this cluster, we're talking to it, right? Talked to it a few seconds ago, and it's saying that it's using a token, right? Whereas if we go to our in cluster, I guess it is still using a token. It's just using a service account token. So the way that we get this to work is we get this to work by some fun trickery. And let me actually pull up a blog post here. Argo CD open Unison. See if I just Google this real quick. Is it? No, that's just the main screen. Cluster. Where'd a blog post? Here we go. Securing multi-cluster Argo CD. So let me go ahead and throw this up here. And this is what we do in the chapter as well. And I'm going to go ahead and throw this in as a comment. I think I can do that. I do like that. No, okay, I'm not really sure. All right, so let's see here. Banners, media assets. Create banner. Add banner. Can I do this? Is that going to work? Show. Okay, cool. There we go. I'm learning how to use StreamYard. So there's the link for the the blog post. And if we look at this, what we're actually doing is, let's see, am I doing the right one? Okay, so what we're actually doing is, do I have a picture? Here we go. And this is what we're doing in the example in the book, where our control plane has an Argo CD. That Argo runs a process, says, I got to go talk to this other node. So it uses its service account as a token exchange with OpenUnison to get a token for our node, calls the remote node Kubo IDC proxy, and then uses that impersonated identity. So we're actually doing this the way that you're supposed to, where there are no static tokens anywhere. I actually gave a talk about this at ArgoCon in Salt Lake City. So I'll see. I'll get the link for that and put that in the notes. But it's a really nice way to do it, and it's, you know, at KubeCon a few weeks ago, I will tell you, people are getting into machine identity. They're getting into this idea that static tokens are bad, and so that we're doing that already in the book. So that's how they talk to each other, or that's how Argo talks to the cluster. So now the question becomes, how do we create a cluster or a cluster when we do our automation? So you can't, in the first two editions of the book, the way that we did this was we would create the application object, which is a CRD. But first we would create the cluster object, which is a Argo CD API. Argo has released, I think it was after the second edition. I don't remember if it was before or after the second edition, but we didn't start using it until the third edition. This idea called an application set, where it's an operator that allows you to define a dynamic process for generating both the application and the resulting project. So if we go ahead and let's log back in, or I guess not log back in, but let's go over to GitLab. And who am I logged in as? I am logged in as Matt. So let's look at projects. Member. So let's look at cluster operations and dev. No. Did we create it? I'm trying to remember if we created it. Is this? No, that's a namespace. Maybe we didn't create it via. I thought we created the application sets. Okay. Yes. So what we did was we created the application set in the control plane inside of a namespace specifically designed for that app. Now, I as a admin have access to this. I as a user do not. And the reason why I do not, let's go ahead and zoom in on this. So this is the application set. The application set is responsible for creating a cluster, potentially, and an application object. So an application object in Argo is what tells Argo what you're able to do. So if you're thinking about like a deployment, right? A deployment, you don't create a pod, create a deployment that creates a replica set that creates a pod. With this approach, you don't create an application, you create an application set that generates a project, a cluster, generates a cluster and an application for you and ties it all together. So if we look at our application set, everything's done through labels. You're able to generate a template. We set up our sync policy, and it sets up the server. Everything gets set up automatically for us, right? Like there's nothing crazy going on here, right? We generate this, and then everything gets generated for us, so that way we don't have to manually generate them inside of our workflows. So that makes it a lot simpler. And you can see here we've got our remote get URL in our server. And so what tells the Argo how to create the project, so you can see here, it's looking for a secret, okay? Clusters are built based off of secret information, because if you're gonna have like a service account or something, that's gotta come from somewhere. So if we look, now did I actually create the secret? I think it actually needs to be an Argo CD. Yes. So now, going back to our Vault cluster, what did I say was the cardinal rule, Scott, of secrets in Git?
Always store them there. Wait, no. Never store them there.
That wasn't funny. I just want to say.
I'm making sure you're listening and don't have a heart attack or something, but I'm hoping nobody actually thought I actually meant that.
Please send all comments and questions.
Yeah.
So, cardinal rule, don't put secrets in Git. I got 2 secrets in Git. Why? So let's take a look. So this is the secret is what Argo uses to generate a project. The application set controller generate a project. Now the assumption is, and this was a valid assumption, that you're going to use something sensitive, a token, a key pair, something to communicate to this API server. Plus, if you wanted to do something where you used Vault as an example to generate this secret using either the Vault injector or external secret operator, you need some place to hold that information, right? Well, here we're doing something really interesting. Our secret says the name of the cluster, URL of the cluster. So this is, and the labels tie everything together. And we've got this provider config. So kube control has a plugin system. It also has something called a exec plugin. This is a specialized kind of plugin where it's specifically designed to allow you to generate something that has tokens in it so that you can go talk to a remote cluster. So this is how, if you're using any of the cloud hosted Kubernetes and you take a look at the kube config that their tools give you, you're going to see this exec provider config, right? Because that's how it works, right? They're not generating certs anymore. Well, I think AKS still does, which is a little weird. But they generate a token for you or a proxy. There are a couple of different mechanisms. But they generate a native IAM token for you that their Kubernetes knows how to interpret. So we're leveraging the same thing here, except instead of calling some IAM provider, we've got a shell script that is going to exchange our service account token for a short-lived token that Argo can use to talk to the remote API server. So our workflow, and we're going to spend a day talking about Open Unison. We don't, like, we always talk about Open Unison on the periphery. We're going to spend a day talking about it. There's a lot going on there. But the point is that when we generate our repo and we generate our manifests, we're generating these really simple objects that don't actually contain any sensitive information. So they can go into Git. And of course, we're using Git to sync Git, which, you know, gets kind of meta. Like, I'm not going to lie, designing this, I got myself confused so many times because there's so many layers of Git sync that you have to keep track of. But that's how the application set operator makes it so that you can dynamically generate both applications and clusters. And so in the third edition of the book, we don't talk to the Argo CD API at all. We just do everything via AppSet. So really powerful mechanism. So that's how stuff gets created inside of Argo. Do you have any thoughts, Scott? I know I've been talking a lot. I know I tend to spend more time in Argo than you do, but
you do, and that's why I'm actually I hate to say absorbing too.
Okay.
Mark, right? So you know, obviously I've done this a lot from a cluster level management, which is just very different because I don't have to worry so much about exposing it to people, and as you know, I really do want to. It's just like you said earlier, the tool. I mean, so many deployments now come with an Argo example. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you used to always be Helm is everything, and now you'll see that with Argo often. So it's definitely a tool that I see advantage, and of course workflows.
Yeah. So I mean, and one of the things that's interesting about Argo is, I mean, I've only ever really seen 3 players in the space. You've got Argo, you've got Flux, and you've got Google, right? You've got Google's part of Anthos. They've got
they got ACM, which is really GitSync.
Yeah.
Right? So yep.
One of the things that I find really interesting is there is a very specific design change between Flux and Argo. That's like 99.999% of the industry, right? When it comes to, you know, those two systems, when it comes to GitOps. Flux very much is a background single tenant approach. And it's, you know, you've got to build it into something else to really make it work. Like I know AKS, Azure's Kubernetes service, they're like, if you use their built-in GitOps server, it's Flux underneath the underneath the covers. One of the things that I don't like about Flux is because it's single tenant, you get massive sprawl. Right, like I was up in Toronto a couple years ago for it wasn't KCD, it was Kube Huddle, first Kube Huddle in Toronto. Hey Marino.
You're supposed to say A after that. Just
oh yeah, hey,
you're in Toronto, A.
So
and it's just, if Marino's around, you know.
Yeah, I don't know that actually.
Yeah.
But another guy who apparently works for a living. So I was up there talking about how, you know, we went through that whole token thing with short-lived tokens. I did a talk on doing that, but with GitHub Actions. And somebody I was talking to was like, yeah, we do this with Flux. And you know, the way that we handle a lot of these use cases with Flux is we just have a Flux for every single tenant. Like, okay, you got to keep that upgraded.
Well, that's
Something
heavy.
breaks, yeah, that's a heavy approach. Whereas Argo went the multi-tenant approach, and I mean, you can do it single tenant, you can do it headless. I don't see a lot
You
of
lose
it.
features with headless and stuff.
Yeah. So it is really great, and it's a really great approach. Now I'm going to show something here. I'm going to log out because I'm not going to be an admin anymore. And I'm going to sign out here. I'm going to log back in as our tenant owner, Jay Jackson. So I'm going to go back into Argo. And you'll see here, I'm tenant owner, right? Like I'm the person who owns this application. All you see is the application, right? There's the control planes aren't there anymore. We don't have our control plane, our dev, and our prod clusters. We only have these two because that, as the admin or the owner for that application, that's all I can see. Right. So that's the Argo RBAC system giving you the ability to expose that to users. It's a little easier probably than just the straight up Kubernetes dashboard. Right. Because I can see my projects quickly.
That's an important note here when you talk about like the one Anthos has with ACM, right, Mark? There's no UI. You got to do something called Nomos for troubleshooting.
Oh, really?
It's not really meant. There's a little bit of UI in the GCP console, but if you're doing it on-prem, you don't want to use that. So this is Nomos command to run to test tools. It's not really meant for giving to developers. It's meant for cluster management, like all your ecosystem.
Gotcha.
You're going to build the cluster, you're going to deploy ACM, and then have it push everything out, which is perfect, right? It does everything else that Argo can do. Delete something, recreates it, drift doesn't occur. But yeah, you're just not going to share it out. So
interesting.
That's where Argo really, really does come in.
Gotcha. Well, that's good to know. So, as a limited user, as a member of a tenant, multi-tenant system, I have a view of the world, right? I'm able to see what's going on from a Git standpoint and a sync standpoint. You can set up Argo to auto sync things. You can set up Argo to require manual sync. But what's really nice about this approach is now I, as the app owner, have visibility into my world, right? I have visibility into what I'm seeing, and it's secure from the standpoint that Argo knows who I am, right? Like if I go over here to user info, make this a little bit bigger, it can see like I'm an owner, right? I'm an owner for my app, and then I'm an approver for my app. So there is a CSV file. So why don't I go ahead and log out of here and I'll log back in. All right, let's go to developer control plane, Kubernetes dashboard. Let's go to I think it's an Argo CD.
No, it's nice, Marcus. I'm glad there's no chat. I was waiting for somebody to maybe come up and go, well, why not Jenkins for this? And we get into a big discussion on those.
Here's this is the SSO config, which we'll look at, but here we go, RBAC. So RBAC gets managed through this one config map. Now it's hot load, right? You make a change to this config map and it'll get picked up by Argo. You don't have to go restarting pods. But you've got to manage this. And so if you remember back to last week, we didn't make any changes to this file in order to make everything work. OpenUnison generated the additions of this file for us. So it gave us the ability to say, we defined several roles inside the book and what we want those roles to do. And then here in our RBAC, we define them. So if you come up here, we can see that we created this. Let's see if I do. No, this doesn't give me a YAML version. Yeah, we can see we've got administrators internal, like that gives me everything, right? I'm an admin, group admin. I can do anything I want. Then everything south of this is all generated for our app by Open Unison. So it becomes really important to automate if you're going to onboard multiple tenants. You don't want to be doing this by yourself, right? That's how Argo works, right? That's how we integrate it with it. That's how we deploy it. That's how we get it working. I guess the last thing I'll show before we look at how we actually deployed it is the applications themselves. So talked about how custom resources, custom resource definitions. I want the application. And then I'm in the right one, Argo. I guess it doesn't actually generate the Argo application object. I thought it might, but I don't actually think it does. Let's see here, if I go into namespaces, you know what? We'll do it this way. I'm going to cheat. All right, so like if I go over here to my app, I go to details, manifest, my app. Oh, okay, interesting. So it doesn't actually have a real object behind it. I thought it had a real object when we used the app set generator. But this is what got generated by the application set generator. So this is what tells Argo what, you know, where the cluster is, where the source is. But that would be the object that you would create on your own if you weren't using the app set generator. I will say there are two basic patterns when it comes to Argo. The first is this application set, which for multi-tenant is definitely the way you should go. You should not be generating these objects manually. If you're using it for single tenant, like I'm going to show you QAlab.tremolo.dev. Oh, I'm actually not signed in here. Hold on. Let me grab over here. K2U. So like this is my lab, Argo CD. Yeah, wrong screen. I'm going to head into my lab, Argo CD, and I'm using something here called the app of apps pattern. So I have one application that has all my applications. And so whenever I want to update an application, I update the application object in Git. This resyncs, which loads in the application object into Argo, which then means I get an application object in Argo, which then gets synced into my cluster, which sometimes can be a bit of a pain. So like I'm going to pick Harvard here as an example. And I'm going to look at the desired manifest. So this object sits in my Git cluster, in my Git repo. It gets loaded in by Argo. And then Argo says, oh, I have a new app object, and then creates my application inside of Argo CD. So it's multi-layered. It can be a little maddening because if you change the Git source, this has to sync before your application sync. So it like I like to do manual sync because I like to have a little bit of control. That's not really the way you're supposed to do GitOps. but it can be a little maddening sometimes. I like this method when you're doing single tenant, right? Like this is a single tenant. I've got an app of apps that syncs in all my applications. Good to go. If you're doing multi-tenant, absolutely use the application set paradigm. Even if you only have one cluster, use an application set. It's way better to manage, way easier to manage.
It might be, Mark, I'm gonna have to call this out because, of course, I deal with this a lot. Is what we're talking about here is, I'm gonna call it, for lack of a better term, dumb syncing, right? There's no controls here. You really want to control Git side. And we've had these lengthy discussions, right? Where if you're going to do this, you better have solid Git controls, whether it's going to be, of course, PRs, commits on it, and approvals, and other things, right? Those are, I'm going to say, those are the least, right? In our kind of case,
it's not
we want to
exactly
change.
dumb though. Like I
Well,
do want to.
I should rephrase. Yeah, I probably shouldn't. That's more like Git sync is really a dumb one, but
Git sync's very dumb. Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
But
You're right.
there are controls in Argo. You do bring up a good point though, because as an example, if I don't have stuff built into Argo, resource quotas are a namespaced object that an admin cannot create, right? If I log in as an admin, and when I say admin, I mean the cluster role admin, which
You're the namespace admin at this point.
Is a namespace admin.
Yep.
It does not include role bindings because role bindings, even though they're at the namespace level, or not role bindings, resource quotas, because even though they're at the namespace level, Arg or Kube doesn't let an admin change those or create them or delete them or whatever because those impact the entire cluster, right? So I, as a tenant, shouldn't be able to change resource quotas without you as the cluster owner saying yes or no. Right? That's bad because I could grow my resource quota and be noisy neighbor and crowd out everything. If I don't have the right setups and we don't bother doing this, we probably could if we spent a little more time. Argo, if I put a resource quota in Argo will sync it.
Makes sense, right? Because
right,
yep,
that's bad. There has been work on giving Argo impersonation capabilities. So being able to say, hey, this project has to run as this user. So you're not creating individual service accounts so much or keys, but when Argo interacts, or really when it writes to the API server, it does so using an impersonated account. I know Red Hat has done a lot of work on it. I don't think it made it in yet because it was only working on sync and not GUI, and so it created kind of a differential in how they the two worked. So it was I think the initial PR was rejected, but it's one of those things that like everybody agrees there needs to be some work on. The other thing that Argo has is a concept called waves. Now we're not using it with in our setup for tenants. But if you think about Helm, right? Helm, you can specify order for certain objects, right? With waves, it's the same type of thing, right? It's not exact one-to-one, but the idea is that if you have let's say you have a deployment that is reliant on a secret gang generated from external secret operator. Well, if you create both of those things at the same time, your deployment's going to be really, really angry until your secret gets synced in.
Oh, and then eventual consistency takes care of it. Sorry, I love poking the stick.
Is a lie, right?
It's to poke the bear, Mark.
Yep, exactly. Then be fighting words in my home. So say, okay, I'm going to say wave 1 is my external secret. and wave 2 is my deployment. So what Argo then does, and this is an annotation on your objects, is Argo will say, okay, I'm going to wait until the external secret is healthy before I synchronize the deployment. So that gives you a little bit of workflow control. So yeah, so that's how Argo runs. And then the last thing I'll talk about the way Argo runs is Argo, when you're talking about Helm, you can use Helm charts as a source for manifests, but it doesn't run the Helm deployment. So you can't use the Helm tool against your infrastructure, even if it's created, even if you have charts as the source of your repo.
So behind the scenes, it's templating it, Mark?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which
I was reading that in the Up and Running book, by the way.
Yeah, it's for the most part, it's fine. There are some charts that it just doesn't work. So, like as an example, GitLab, you can't deploy the GitLab Helm chart via Argo CD. At least I've never gotten it to work. I've always had to run that one manually. The Prometheus stack, stuff where it launches a lot of jobs and whatnot, it and has a lot of sequencing, don't work super well.
I mean,
Now
for
that
the stuff
said,
it works with, it does work well because you do a values file, put it up, and it is nice that the templating uses that.
yeah, I mean, I also like doing it when you're talking about a promotion process. Like I like the idea of, there are two schools of thought, right? When it comes to GitOps, all your manifests should be static in each environment, or you have something that generates manifests, and then the only thing that changes between environments is a values file.
Yeah.
And so you treat your Helm charts as artifacts instead of code. And then the only thing that goes between environments is a values file. I like both approaches for different scenarios. We talked about this last week where, the promotion process in GitOps is really one of the hardest parts because your dev environment, your prod environment are very rarely the same.
Oh, heck, I mean, if you're doing Nginx, we run into this, Mark. They're like, you should graduate this to the prod. And I'm like, that's great. The wildcards are different.
Yeah.
I can't graduate. Oh, I could graduate it, but nothing works.
Right.
And I'm like, doesn't work like that.
You can't.
File could.
Yeah, you can't draw a straight line from dev to prod.
Right.
Right. You got to have something that
very rarely generic deployment, maybe an Nginx web server that does hello world.
Yeah, I mean, I got to talk to a database. Guess what? That database connection string is going to change.
Yeah.
Different
vaults. There's so many, right? It's very different.
So that's where Cargo comes in. Cargo is a tool from Acuity. I have not had a chance to play with it, but that's
hear a lot about it, right, Mark? I have to get it on my list too. But
yeah, and that's one that I'm sure we'll play with once we get into
more excursions.
Yeah, more excursions. Have some fun. So we're at the top of the hour. The last thing I wanted to bring up before we call it an afternoon, I just kind of wanted to show off, see if I can find the right code window. Is this the right one? This is the one I was working on with Headlamp. No. No. Is it? No. You know what? I'm just going to create a new window. I went through earlier this week and cleared out my all my code windows, and there were 30 of them.
Yeah, I know what that's like. It's like the browser. By the end of a day, I'm
exactly.
I don't know what tab's what because they're too small to even see an icon.
All right, so let's kind of bring this down here. Oops. All right, so let's, all right, so we're going to come over to chapter 19, Pulumi, source, lib, put in here, no, dev platform, Argo CD. So the Argo CD deployment itself is actually pretty straightforward. We used, oh, no, go away. We used, we used Pulumi to deploy it. And really we used Pulumi to run the Helm chart. And so we generated our own values. Let's see here. Here we go. So here are our Helm values. And we said applications that allow any namespace, and that's because in the control plane, the only people who have access to the control plane are systems and administrators, right? So we don't have to worry about somebody just generating an application set on their own. And then configs, so where Argo CD is, we set up OIDC built in. So it is a it's a CM within a CM, which is a little annoying, but that's the way it is. And then, a couple of different parameters to make it work a little bit easier. And this initial policy can disable DEX, right? We talked about that earlier. We let the ingress get generated for us. And then this is where we're doing some kind of interesting stuff. So going back to what we talked about at the very beginning about syncing and securely talking, the script that we mentioned, Argo doesn't ship that in its container. So it gives you the ability to have init containers that allow you to load up the Argo CD container without having to pre-build your own version, because that'd be really annoying to do. So we pull down our custom script, using curl. First we get curl, then we get our custom script. I'm going to end up updating this in the not too distant future to work with our actual STS that we now have in OpenUnison, but that's a different conversation. And then we just run it, right? Like there's not really that much there. We run the Helm deployment and then we're good to go. There is a bit in OpenUnison. We'll talk about that when we do our OpenUnison stream that is focused on the trust and then the workflows. But other than that, that's it. So it's a pretty straightforward. And I will tell you, I did a bad thing. I didn't version pin this. So when I wrote this, they were still on 2x, and this worked beautifully with Argo CD3 that came out a few months ago. So bravo to the Argo team for not making my life harder. So yeah, so that's Argo kind of in a nutshell. Any parting thoughts here, Scott, before we close it out for the day?
No, again, I think just reiterating to people that I look at a lot of books, and I did like the up and running book, and then we talked about it last week a bit, right? And obviously I encourage people to go buy it. I've seen vendors hand it out.
Oh, you don't have to buy it. You get it for free.
Yeah, I figured, but hey,
yeah,
we don't offer
you can
for
just
like.
download it. I think is it CodeFresh that's giving it away?
Might have been that one. It's right in the front of the PDF.
Yeah, I don't remember
that I
if
have.
it's Foodie or CodeFresh. The author works for one of those two. I don't remember which. I apologize.
Oh, that's right.
Everybody that I'm getting it wrong, but he worked, or she, I don't even remember who wrote it. Works for one of the major vendors in the Argo space, and so yeah, don't go buying it.
Why. Yep. That makes sense.
You can get it for free.
Definitely
Without
go
stealing
read
it.
Though. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've covered deploying our tenant. We've talked about GitOps. We haven't talked about Harbor or GitLab. So maybe we'll cover those
Next week.
next week.
I should be on time next week. I actually start vacation next Wednesday
Okay.
for the whole year. So.
Well, yeah. Well, next week will be the last one for the year because I'm on vacation between Christmas and New Year's. We're going to take a family road trip to the Grand Canyon in Arizona. Well, we're going to fly to Arizona, then we're going to do a road trip.
It's National Lampoon Borsteen Edition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're going to make our way up to the Grand Canyon and then down to Tucson and everything in between. Yeah, so I think next week we'll do GitLab and GitLab and Harbor. I don't know that we can do a full show on either of those, but
Harbor can get very complex. We don't need to get into all of it.
yeah, like
Talk
we're
about
not
a
gonna
bunch.
get too deep into it. More just like what to think about when deploying a container registry.
We don't need to go through all the trivia and down the line. We can
Yeah,
mention it in passing, right? But it's a powerful registry. Obviously, I'm a big fan.
yeah, and then I think our last one is we'll wrap it up with Open Unison, and we'll look at the different workflows, and then I think that will cover everything in chapter 19.
Yep.
Yeah, so we got 2 weeks of the book, and then next year we'll start our excursions.
Yep. We're already working on those aligning. So as you know,
Sweet.
as I posted, so everybody saw some of that. I know.
Yep.
Like I said, for storage, we'll have Portworx.
Nice.
Some excellent people from there, and not one of them. I think we might get used to work at T-Mobile, doing a lot of
Cool.
Kubernetes. So we're bringing in those vendors are going to be, of course, as we've always said, Mark, right? They can talk about their product and why it's great, but it's really more for the technology, and they all are just like us. They just want to talk about it, right? Nothing wrong with saying, here's what we have. More about, cool, why do the CSI? Why not do CSI stuff? Why do this? Why do that? There's just a lot of reasons that people really should know that. And it can get complex in storage, right?
Oh, yeah.
Some might go 2 weeks. We won't know until we start them, and then we'll go from there.
Yep. And we should probably set up like a spreadsheet or something to track some of this.
Yeah.
So hey, everybody, thanks for coming out. Thanks for hanging out as always. Kafka, always thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next week when we talk about Harbor and GitLab.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
And